Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm going to be playing Order of Battle Pacific, a new game out by Matrix and Slytherin Games, made by the Aristocrats. This is part 2 of my Imperial Japan Let's Play. You can see here we're on the campaign map. We already did the battle or the attack on Pearl Harbor. The next battle is going to be Luzon in the Philippines, the advance on Manila. You can see here we've got one unit in our corps, so we have one army corps. It appears you can have multiple army corps based on what you see at the bottom of the screen. That one unit is a dive bomber unit as part of our corps. And then you have specializations, of which we chose the Bushido code, which gives you better fighting abilities when surrounded. And then we're playing in the medium level of difficulty. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump in to the next battle here. We can check out our mission briefing. The 14th Army has taken North Luzon province, facing little opposition as we advance south. However, we can expect the enemy resistance to increase. So we've landed on the Philippines, the island of Luzon, the big island on the Philippines where Manila is. Basically, we're on a strict timetable. We need to crush the enemy defenses and capture the main bridges so we can advance on Manila quickly. That'll allow us to overrun the enemy before they can fall back on Bataan and that fortress city, or not fortress city, but that peninsula of forts in the southwestern corner of the Filipino island of Luzon. There's only one major American airbase in the entirety of the Philippines. That is Clark Airfield down there on the southwest corner, the extreme southwest corner. You can see here, this is a very narrow map. I'd be interested to see, as we enter the deployment phase, I'll be interested to see what or how extensive the maps are in the game. The attack on Pearl Harbor map seemed pretty wide and pretty long. This map seems very, very long, but very, very narrow. So I'm concerned. I guess we'll find out. This isn't, criticism because I haven't played the scenario yet. This is literally the third scenario I've played my entire experience of the game, but it does seem pretty narrow and might limit ability or options to maneuver. Nonetheless, it's a very distant objective here. As we scroll down the map, we can see our objectives are pretty far away. The objective cities that we need to take, the 5 objective cities, are the ones with the flags with kind of the golden base at the bottom and the little star on top of the flag. You can see on the left here, right next to the our first unit here on the left, that gold American flag on that first ring of cities is one of the objectives. While we are looking at deploying our forces, you can see we have several army units on the map looking at where to deploy our air force and upgrade that. So the casualties it sustained at the end of the last battle in Pearl Harbor have carried over just as they would have in the Panzer Corps series. I know I'm making a lot of comparisons to Panzer Corps, but I think given the aesthetics of this game and given the topic and the type of game this is, those are natural comparisons, especially because it's made by the same, or not made, but published by the same company. But I think as you see, as we work through this scenario, the game plays very differently than Panzer Corps. Anyway, so we've got these units here deployed. We only start with 3 infantry units and 1 air unit. The air unit's part of our corps, which means we carry it over battle to battle. The land units are brand new. They just came in. Not sure if they're part of our corps or not, but we do have some additional money. We've got over 500. So what we're going to do is we're going to purchase some artillery. In my experience, games like this, artillery is always very important. Now, Japan doesn't apparently have much in the way of heavy artillery. 75 millimeter artillery appears to be our maximum ability or maximum artillery size right now. But nonetheless, you can see there we just put 2 units on the map. I plan to advance down the map kind of in 2 pincers, 2 wings down the main roads toward the objectives to the south. So to do that, we'll have 1 artillery piece supporting each of the lines of advance, and then we'll also purchase some heavy infantry here. I think we can afford at least 2 companies of heavy infantry with some trucks for transport to give them greater mobility to strengthen each of the attacks on each wing. Again, remember, we only started with 3 infantry units, so we should have 5 in addition to the 2 artillery. That gives us 7 ground units and 1 air unit. We still have a little bit of extra money left over after we do that, though, so I think what we're going to look at doing is purchasing another air unit. One of our secondary objectives is to take out the airbase at Clark Field, so I think what we'll do is we'll purchase some GM4 or G4M1s Hamakis, or the G4, was the G4 the Betty? I think the G4M was the Betty, and we'll get flying here. You can see Clark Field all the way down at the end of the map on the left side, but it is a secondary objective. It basically states if you destroy this airfield, the enemy will be more vulnerable and you'll have air superiority for the rest of the campaign. I don't know how many more scenarios are in the Philippines campaign, but I'll go ahead and send my dive bombers to the south as well. Meanwhile, we'll start advancing with our infantry here. You can see probably not the best idea to choose to attack an enemy unit if you don't know they're there. Don't rush too far forward and without reconnaissance ahead, because we just ran into essentially an ambush, and these Filipino troops don't appear to be very good, because our guys, when we do just a regular move and attack through a river, we've got a 2-0 advantage, but the other guys gave pretty heavy casualties to us. It was 3-2. So again, don't advance too rapidly. At the same time, if you don't advance rapidly enough, then what you just saw there happens and you waste a turn because your infantry doesn't close with the enemy. Anyway, so there you have it. Our units are starting to advance on both of these cities here, and we're launching some artillery barrages at the enemy as well. I guess we'll kind of have one infantry, one engineer unit go toward that middle city as well. That about does it, though, for this first turn here, as we launch one final attack on these American troops on the south, or on the western portion of the battlefield. You can see here several rivers make natural obstacles in our advance, and our goal is to get to the south and through Manila before the enemy can destroy some of the critical bridges over this bigger river to the south. I don't know the name of it. Now, I am going to be mixing in some historical commentary in with this series. This is undoubtedly going to be a rather long series, so I will do some historical commentary based on the actual Second World War. But at this moment, it's still kind of an impressions, getting my feel for the game, talking about the way the game plays, and we'll go from there. Now, speaking of the way the game plays, one thing I mentioned in my first video, and I think really stands out here in this video, is the quality of the animation in the game, the quality of the aesthetics in the game. You really have a sense that there was a lot of care and detail done in the animations, because while this is a hex-based game, you can see here when we launch artillery, there's a really neat little animation. It's, it seems, you'd think it's, oh, no big deal, it's just a tiny little animation, but you can see the artillery shell arc across the battlefield and slam into the opposition's position. The artillery piece also recoils like a real artillery piece would, with the barrel bouncing back, and that's one of my favorite graphics in this entire game. As odd as that may sound, I really do enjoy that. Meanwhile, here we're flying our bombers to the south toward Clark Field. In doing so, we're bombing enemy targets along the way, hopefully to maybe soften things up, or at least divert enemy, not prestige, but enemy money to needing to recoup or rest to recoup these units. There's also a helmet that appears to pop up every time you bomb a city, which somehow indicates command attrition or command points being attrited. I'm not sure I fully understand how that works, but on the right there next to the coins on the bottom right, you see that Japanese flag above the mini-map. To the right of that, there's the coins, which is how much money you have. To the right of that is a helmet with a number next to it, which represents your command points. That influences how many units you can have on the map. So, when you purchase a unit that uses up those command points, essentially it's a way to prevent huge stacks of units, but it also is something apparently that you lose when you bomb a city, but you seem to get it right back. So I don't know if that's like a temporary one-turn type thing or not. I'm not really sure, but I guess that's something maybe I'll find out more as I play more. But yeah, I mean, I guess one thing, I mentioned some comparisons to Panzer Corps, but the animations are clearly superior. Granted, it's a much newer game. When did Panzer Corps come out? Like 2 years ago. But that's a neat little feature here. And again, I'm sorry if this is tired of me drawing these comparisons. They're different games made by different developers, but the style of game is similar, so I think they're fair comparisons to bring up. As you can see here, we already took the city on the right flank with our infantry driving south over this river. On the left flank, we're in the process of taking our first objective city. I don't know the name of the city, though. It doesn't seem to have a name. It's just called Town, so I guess that's not something that's provided. It would be nice if it was provided, if it told you the name of the city, but it's not. There we have accomplished an objective. Took that city, drove that unit back, and we've now taken our first of our objective cities. As our planes continue their transit south towards Clark Field, we'll go ahead and bomb another city that has some troops in it, and again, influence or attrit the enemy's what have you, enemy's command points by doing so, and there we've got a target for our dive bombers as well. So nothing too substantial. Obviously, it's not going to win the war just by bombing those units. But again, it's at the very least, it's a distraction. If this game works the way other games do regarding entrenchment, it'll soften up enemy units and kind of eat up a turn they could be entrenching, and kind of go from there. Meanwhile, in the center here, we can see instead of having two pincers, we've kind of got a three-pronged advance going here, and we've got this Filipino city that's putting up some resistance, inflicting some casualties. Meanwhile, our objective city here is under counterattack by some American units, both anti-tank and infantry. We don't actually have any tank units on the field here. We've captured 1 of 5 objectives, and our secondaries are all question marks. Manila has been declared an open city. Basically, the Americans abandoned Manila early in the campaign of Luzon in an attempt to protect the city from being destroyed in a house-to-house combat environment. They essentially said, we'll pull out of the city if the Japanese agree not to bombard it. There was some fighting, I believe, in the city, but in general, it was a pretty open, left as a mostly open city. I wonder, how that would have influenced the campaign if the Americans had adopted a more later war approach, or kind of like an Eastern Front approach, like what the Russians did, and attempted to defend the city block by block. Supplies still would have been an issue, especially in a high-intensity combat situation like that. Perhaps it would have accelerated ammunition shortages and other problems that would eventually result during the siege of Bataan. But I also wonder if, stopping the Japanese in Manila could have potentially delayed the Japanese advance and allowed them to kind of gather up more supplies, food, things like that. Then again, the Japanese did advance, as mentioned in this video already. Not this video, but in our briefing for this scenario, the Japanese did advance on Manila from the south as well, so it might have just ended up leaving U.S. forces being caught in a pincer movement and surrounded and defeated even more easily. Again, I'm not an expert on the subject. That may be something I'll read into and look into the prospects of that, but it's an interesting thought of a street-to-street type engagement taking place in Manila. I think that would have been an interesting, something interesting to see. Now, as we work our way through here, we're about 13 minutes into the scenario. We're about 4 turns in. You can see there's 50 turns in this particular battle, and the goal to essentially, I believe, what would equate a major victory would be winning in 35. So hopefully we can accomplish that. I guess we'll see. Meanwhile, we've got our troops advancing along the front here. American anti-tank weapons advancing against us, surprisingly, and some anti-aircraft guns shooting at our dive bombers. But on the whole, not much the Americans and Filipinos have been able to do to stop us thus far, and we're getting pretty close to Clark Field, but we're not quite there yet. We do need to destroy the airfield within 10 turns, I believe, to accomplish our secondary objective. You can see there the airfield is just really a fuel dump, it looks like. It doesn't look like an actual hangar with an air unit there. So that's different. One other thing that, again, I find very interesting about this game is the way artillery works. You can see there's this white kind of range around the gun, which represents the artillery piece's range, which I think is... I really like this feature. One of the criticisms I've had of other games like this, for example, Panzer Corps, again, I hate to harp on it and keep going back to it, but one of the things that does annoy me a little bit about that is it always feels like the maps are relatively big, but it always feels like your units are all crammed forward in just this pack
up at the very front of your front lines with no room to maneuver, and artillery doesn't have much of a range. Like a 75 millimeter gun, you would have a range of 2. Essentially, it's the ability to fire, not do a non-direct fire, so you can shoot from not being an adjacent hex, but you literally have to be within 1 hex of being an adjacent hex. Now that obviously does a good job of simulating a shorter range artillery that 75 millimeter guns would have, but even like the 105s or the 155s, I think they only had like a range of 3 or 4 tops. And this game really makes it feel like artillery does have a purpose as indirect fire. It can fire from quite a bit of ways away. And maybe the hexes represent a smaller geographic area, I'm not sure, but that's kind of a neat feature here. The AI is apparently much smarter than me right now because they just cut off our forces into 2 pockets. They cut off our heavy infantry unit at the bridge there with the infantry moving in behind, and then the enemy anti-tank guns also moved in behind our other units. So we've got 2 infantry units cut off. Being surrounded is represented by that red circle on the unit. Now, apparently my decision for focusing on the Bushido code as a specialization area of emphasis was a good decision as well, because that code makes us more effective in fighting when surrounded. So the Allies have already launched a shifty counterattack against us by driving in behind us and cutting off those 2 units. And they immediately went out of supply within 1 turn. This is something I really like in this game. You can kind of see it on the map. You see these little areas of like red, blackish kind of boundaries, which represent the front lines as your units advance through a corridor. They create this essentially front line of area where you can draw supply from, and then if the enemy cuts in behind you, they can cut you off from supply. So I think that's a really neat feature. Personally, I really like that, and that's different than a lot of games like this represent. This game definitely represents front lines and represents supplies in a way that I'm not accustomed to. Most games, I remember thinking back to Panzer General, you might have been able to, they just did it again, they cut another one of our units off. In Panzer General, you might have been able to, if my memory serves me right, surround a unit and cause supply to be lost, but I'm pretty certain the way it really worked was essentially you just surrounded them and you got a combat modifier for attacking from multiple hexes. Whereas this game, the way it works is you immediately go out of supply and lose combat effectiveness. Now there is an exception, which you'll see a little bit later in this scenario, where units are not out of supply. If they're in an objective city, they can draw supply from that. I believe regular cities they can also draw supply from. So it's not perfectly realistic, but it is neat to have to worry about your rear and your flanks. Otherwise, you endanger essentially your entire force. You don't have ammunition per se. There's not a specific number of rounds that you can use up. We did mention in the last video that torpedoes have a cooldown effect, which is another cool feature that I really enjoy. I think it adds a different dimension to the game. But other than that cooldown effect, you don't really run out of ammo per se with your units. As long as you're in supply, you can continue fighting. But if you run out of, if you're out of supply, essentially if you run or get surrounded, then supply becomes an immediate issue, which is incredibly realistic for this type of fighting in this age, because frankly, in this age of combat in World War II, these units would be representing probably regiments or maybe brigades, or I doubt they're divisions. They could be divisions. We don't have a ton of them on the map, which eat up immense quantities of ammunition in modern combat and burn through, perfidious amounts of artillery shells. And as a result, essentially, the second you're cut off from your base of supply, you're immediately going to be faced with serious supply problems. And I really like the way the AI is kind of utilizing their forward forces to delay our advance by just constantly cutting those supply lines, jumping in behind us, and threatening our base of supply again. So, my flanking maneuver on the right side of the map is allowing me to keep most of these units relatively safe. They are cut off here again by the Allies, but I just reestablished a supply line with that far right flank. That kind of envelopment feature has allowed me to get these units back in supply real quick. And my artillery, which is now out of supply as well, pounding the Americans. Also, we finally just destroyed that anti-tank unit, which was seriously a pain in the ass. and now we're going to have supply again for these units as well. So it does appear, at the very least, because we destroyed that one unit and the other American unit is kind of advanced toward that central city, that our supply situation should be better. I don't think they'll be able to reach all the way out to the eastern or right side of the map and cut our forces totally off. But essentially, yeah, that's where we're at right now. The Americans and the Filipinos, well, specifically the American units, did a great job of delaying us, probably delayed our advance by 2 or 3 turns by all those cutting actions driving in behind us. And we'll see if that ends up playing a substantial role or not in our advance and our ability to meet our deadlines and win this battle. So that's the biggest difference, I would say, between the first video and the second video here. The first video in which I focused on the air units, because that's all that was available in the attack on Pearl Harbor. And the second video here is the main difference with ground combat is that need of staying in supply. And air units have the same thing where, you know, they've got that limited range, you know, how many turns they can essentially fly around before they need to return back and get back in supply. But just, I suppose, something worth kind of mentioning here as we move on to turn number 9 and continue to pound Clark Field here on the southwest corner of the Philippines. You can see the airfield is down to its very last, but we have to destroy it by the 10th turn. So gonna go ahead and bomb it here. You can see you get a special event. You get different events that pop up when you accomplish different secondary objectives. So for example, in the Pearl Harbor scenario, the last scenario, there was a little pop-up when we had destroyed 8 enemy fighter aircraft, which was a secondary objective of our mission, which basically said that our units gained increased experience from the successes that we had, and it would, you know, we had several aces, and we got that commander on the top right, which I just realized I haven't assigned to anyone yet, so probably should do that shortly. That's basically kind of like a hero unit in some games. They make a unit better. A very common feature, Commander of the Great War has that as well, where you get leaders who influence a unit and make it kind of a special unit. So we won that. From that, you got a little pop-up telling you that you had that, had basically triggered that event. You also got a pop-up when you destroyed all the enemy battleships, basically stating that your attacks had been so successful that all the enemy battleships were destroyed, indicating that it would make the Americans weaker later in the campaign. In addition to that, we just had the air superiority pop up. So what that told us is that for the rest of the Filipino campaign, we essentially wouldn't have to worry much in the way of the American Air Force because the successful destruction of Clark Field by apparently turn 12, so I could have saved that dive bomber unit and just had the level bomber finish things off the next turn. But anyway, essentially that update tells us that the Americans aren't going to, they're going to somehow, and it's not clear how because we can't see what the AI spends their money on, but somehow the AI is going to be limited in what they can do as far as, you know, building or supplying air units. So that's, you know, another event, another impact that obtaining secondary objectives can have later in the campaign. So I think that's kind of a neat feature that's certainly unique in games like this that I've played before. I've never, you know, Panzer Corps doesn't do it, Panzer General doesn't do it. I'm not aware of any other games that, you know, you have that secondary objective other than just, you know, winning a major objective and maybe unlocking a scenario early. The ability to influence further scenarios based on specific secondary objectives that are not directly tied to taking a city by a certain date is kind of a neat feature. That's not something that I think I've seen before. There is we've got that American unit cut off. Looks like they're cut off because they don't have any supply route via road, I would suppose. That's another interesting... Oh, no, they're surrounded because they're in a big pocket there. But anyway, so that's another unique feature. And actually, when I was playing the one other... I played the American attack on... or the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and now I'm playing the Manila campaign, or Manila battle. But the only other battle that I had played in this is how fresh I am to the game, was a American version of the Pearl Harbor attack. And when we shot down 5 Japanese attacking aircraft, it told us essentially that we had accomplished some attrition on the Japanese and that their air crews would be of lower quality in future battles. So that was another neat little kind of occurrence, which I haven't played anymore as the Americans at this point, mainly because I felt, and I went over this in great detail in the last video, but mainly because I felt that Pearl Harbor, as a first look at the game from the American side, is pretty dull in that all you're doing is responding to a Japanese attack, and it seems too easy to win that battle. It seems like perhaps the wrong starting point for a campaign as the Americans. But as the Japanese, it makes a lot of sense because it introduces you to air attack and kind of eases you into the game, because really all you have to worry about is air units and one naval unit. And then the Manila campaign, or Manila battle here, as the second battle, eases you in further because you mix air units in with ground units, in which all you have to worry about is air and ground. There really isn't much in the way of naval. And then, hopefully, within a couple of turns, we'll have some more ability to use naval engagements as well. So the game kind of eases you into the campaign. And in that sense, I think the Japanese campaign, thus far, what I've experienced of it, has been designed brilliantly. And that's why I'm doing my Let's Play as the Japanese, not because I have some fascination with them, because while Imperial Japan is interesting, I think to me the time period of Japan during the Russo-Japanese War is personally more interesting. But I don't know where I was going to go with that, other than just stating that I think generally I would play as the Americans in the war in the Pacific, but playing as the Japanese, I feel like I always play as the bad guys in my quote-unquote bad guys. No, actually, that's pretty accurate. The Japanese certainly would be the bad guys. I feel like I always play as the bad guys in my Let's Plays. I'm trying to think. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't consider the Confederacy the bad guys. A lot of people would. But my Civil War games, I feel like I play as the Confederacy. Although I guess, no, in my last one I did play as the Union. I played as Hancock, so I guess not. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. So, that ability for impact or certain events to have a long-term influence on the campaign is, I think, really neat. And even though the attack on Clark Field is obviously only going to affect maybe one or two more battles after this, depending on how many more battles there are on the Philippines, it's still a neat feature to have. The American influence on the Japanese aircraft by shooting down a lot of them at Pearl Harbor, I think was an even more interesting approach to take. So certainly something I'll keep my eye on and try and see and gauge how much of an impact this does have. But again, some really neat features here in this game that are different than any other turn-based war game like this that I've played before. Again, still really love those combat animations, especially that artillery, just that recoil of that gun and then the shell kind of moving across the screen and landing on its target. Just, I don't know why. That really interests me and is a really cool little feature that I think is awesome. Meanwhile, we're focusing on this American city here that's cut off. One thing that bothers me is the seeming invincibility of supply points when they have an objective city. Again, this was a big criticism I had of the Commander of the Great War series, and it appears to be an issue here in this series as well, as we've cut these American units off in this city up here on the northwest, and they are still in supply. I could understand giving them a couple of turns of additional supply, but to leave them in supply perpetually when they're surrounded just because they have an objective city with them is a little bit annoying to me. Again, I'm not going to harp on it. All in all, this game has been a lot of fun so far, but that is one thing that just kind of seems like every game does it. It's not like it's the Aristocrats alone. Again, Lord's Game Studios did it. Pretty sure Panzer General didn't really have a frontline supply type situation, so that was different. And neither did Panzer Corps really, so a different scenario, I suppose, altogether. But still, seems like a lot of games do that. Maybe that's just the way you have to design a game. If you need to spawn supplies, if you're trying to simulate a supply route, you obviously need supply to generate somewhere, and if it generates in the city, well, then if the unit's in the city, I suppose it might be more of a design limitation in the way these types of games work than any kind of intent. But anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on that here. One other thing you'll notice is the color on the strength for the units starts to change colors. So it can kind of turn a goldish or kind of orangish, and then it can turn red as well as the white as the standard color. And what that represents, I believe, it doesn't say it explicitly at anything I've seen so far in this scenario, but what it says essentially is the effectiveness of the unit. Is it disorganized? Is it suppressed? Does it have a solid amount of cohesion? And with that red color, essentially the combat effectiveness of the unit drops dramatically as you end up. It drops dramatically as you end up having that color kind of change. White units are highly effective, and you'll get the best combat out of them. Units with a red text, you'll get very little combat effect for them. And really the only way to regain that composure is to reinforce and rest that unit. Probably not best to leave them on the front line, as I'm doing in this case, but luckily for me, the enemy is weak enough that they don't have the ability to counterattack and do anything about it. Now that we took that objective city here, you can see these other two units to the north of the city are cut off, and that is represented by the red little circle placed around them. So we've now got these. We destroyed one American unit, and now we've got an American and a Filipino unit that are surrounded and without supply. So we'll go ahead and hammer them mercilessly with artillery fire. The game does seem to do a good job of rewarding you for concentration of fire. So like most other hex-based games, you benefit from focusing all of your units attacking one enemy unit and kind of working your way down the line, destroying one unit at a time, rather than kind of a more evened approach, which makes sense. Anyway, so we took the one objective city there. We just destroyed the Filipino unit, and all that's left is the American unit here. But that unit of ours that just moved is out of its combat effectiveness is low, because you can see its color there is representing the fact that it is ineffective right now. Meanwhile, we just purchased a tank unit, only to realize that the little helmet icon on the bottom right there above the minimap, just above to the right of the minimap, that helmet with the number 4, is telling us that we don't have enough command authority, essentially, to deploy this unit that we just purchased, this armor unit. We purchased a Japanese armor unit. We don't have the command points to deploy it. Essentially, that's because we have too many units on the map right now. So we've got too many units for us to command. We've kind of reached the stack limit for the battle, and we have to wait until we have more units available. Now, different units have different command requirements. So an armored unit, for example, requires more command than a infantry unit. So we could build and deploy an infantry unit, but we cannot build and deploy a armor unit. That's another unique and interesting feature that I don't think I've seen before, and I quite like. Anyway, we destroy that American unit, and we begin the drive south again. So things seem like they're going pretty slow. We're 16 turns in, but we've taken another objective city and are plowing our way south down the map. We're a little bit less than halfway down the map, with about half of the objective points taken. We are making good progress. We're losing casualties, but we are making enough progress largely to replace our casualties with the money that we are earning from taking these cities, as well as the money we earn turn to turn. You get basically a income every single turn. You start at plus 15 every single turn with your... as we'll go ahead and land these guys here. As you end your turn, you get a little bit of additional money, and then as you take certain objectives cities, you earn a little bit of bonus money as well. Meanwhile, we went ahead and we landed that air unit, and we'll go ahead and look at ending the turn. Again, one thing you may want to consider, pincer assaults are very useful, but it does represent, I think the game represents does a good job of representing the fact that often, while there's this idea of blitzkrieg along these very narrow fronts, often the most successful attacks were placed at wide fronts where the enemy couldn't focus all its attention on the head of your column. And I think the kind of the narrow way that your troops advance down the map is represented in that, because if you don't advance along multiple avenues with multiple units, you risk all of your units being cut off, just as it was earlier in this scenario when the Americans snuck in behind us. You also appreciate the importance of not leaving enemy units in your rear, and the value you can gain by going around enemy units, flanking them, and cutting them off. So there are tactical elements in this game. Despite it being a text-based game, there are definitely tactical elements in the game that I think are very well done. I think it would be more appealing to try and surround and isolate units if objective cities didn't generate supply the way that they do, because then you could surround major cities and cut them off from supply. as it stands right now, you're really limited in doing that. You can see here it looks like the Americans have brought in a B-17 unit, so while we do have air superiority, and this is the first we've seen of an enemy air unit, it's only at half strength as well, so I wonder if that's because of our bombing of Clark Field. I wonder if maybe it would have been a full strength unit otherwise. You can see here I'm working my way around this Filipino unit to try and cut them off. Doesn't appear to be an objective city, so it shouldn't generate supply, I don't believe. And then if we surround them, that'll give us an easier time of it in terms of dealing with this city. Meanwhile, my two-pronged pincer offensive really never developed that way. I started that way, but now I'm just kind of advancing straight down the map without much in the way of flanking, just kind of flanking locally rather than on a more strategic and wide level. You can see here we're attempting to move around this city as well. Again, the one risk you have is when you try and surround a city, if you don't do a good job of supporting your flanks, the enemy can just jump over one hex and cut off your troops. They could do that to one of our units here, but I'm guessing they want to maintain the city, and they're entrenched, so they'll probably stay put on kind of this western flank here. Meanwhile, it's worth pointing out here. Obviously, this video is a bit longer than a lot of my videos are. Usually, my Let's Play videos tend to be around 30 minutes or so. This one's pushing 40. I'll probably cut it off at the halfway point of the battle, which will be 25 turns, which will be 6 more turns. So we could well get into the mid to late 40s in terms of the length of this video. Let me know if that's something that you think is okay, something that works. I know I've had some people comment that they listen or watch these videos on their way to work, and that it's a perfect length, around the 30-minute length for that. Obviously, these will be a bit longer, so that may not be as ideal for some people. You know, I don't really have... I tend to play what I want to play, and if people watch my stuff and enjoy it, great, I love it, but I do this more because... well, there's 2 reasons. I mean, one reason I do these videos is because I love the feedback, I love the community. I never expected to have this many people follow and enjoy my stuff, and that means a lot to me, so I continue to do it for that reason. But the other reason is the reason I started. It's just something I enjoy doing. However, it really makes no impact to me if I cut these videos up and shorten them, or if I continue the more long-form approach. I'm not going to shorten them down to 5 or 10-minute videos. You know, I'm not going for that kind of quick-hit, no attention span type video. But I am interested in, perhaps adjusting things. You know, if 30 minutes works better than 45, then so be it. It's really easy for me to just cut out 15 minutes from one recording, throw it in with the next one, and make it longer. Now, the one thing about this approach is if I cut the recording off at 25 turns and the battle goes 35 turns, the next recording might be much shorter. But I'd like to try and keep videos limited to focusing on one battle. So the first recording was over 40 minutes and focused entirely on the battle of the attack on Pearl Harbor. This video may be an hour and a half when it's all said and done. It might be 60 minutes. It might be 50 minutes. I don't know. But when the Battle of the Philippines is done, I'm not... You know, I'm cutting the recording off here probably at 25 turns. That could mean that the second video is much shorter, but I don't want to, even if it is shorter, I don't want to throw in 10-15 minutes of another video for another battle. Again, I want to keep the battles separate. One other thing that you may notice here is I did publish this video directly after the first video, which was yesterday. The game just came out 2 days ago, so my goal here, I'm not going to throw content at you like crazy, because I'm not someone who really... I probably would stop following someone if they were throwing out 4 videos a day, or maybe even a video every single day. I'd probably lose interest, and I notice, you know, obviously it's clear my views go down a bit when I release a video every single day. A little bit of viewer fatigue, perhaps, which is understandable, but I am going to be releasing more videos here late May, early April, late April, early May, in an attempt to get more people to see these videos since the game will have just launched. You know, I'd like to... I don't really worry about how many views my videos get in general, but if the game just came out and if there's a lot of buzz and popularity and people interested in the game, by all means, check out my Let's Play, because there aren't a lot of people who do Let's Plays of these types of games out there. So if someone is considering looking at this game, I want to make sure that this is out there for them so they can see it. I don't really consider myself a buyer's guide. Again, I don't do reviews critical reviews anyway. I mention things I like, things I don't like, that type of thing, but that's just my personal take. I don't really attempt to be objective. I don't claim to be authoritative, and the reason for that, as I've mentioned before, is while I've never drawn a paycheck from a video game to this date, I may someday, but thus far I have not. I am part of the Scourge of War team, building the Scourge of War Waterloo game, and I don't want to have that appearance of impropriety. You know, my goal is not to try and claim to be a critic or a video game review person, because while I enjoy following a lot of those types of people, and while I certainly do share my own opinion, that does not mean I am in any way a video game critic, because I am not. And that's not what I'm trying to be. I'm just trying to share my experience playing the game, what I like about the game, maybe what I don't like about the game, but without trying to be an authority or a buyer's guide. My goal is not to be a buyer's guide. However, I do think there is value in being able to see a game before you purchase it. And this series hopefully will do that. Hopefully this series will do a good job of showing you what the actual experience would be without it being an advertising or promotional event per se, because I don't benefit in any way if you buy the game or not. It doesn't really affect me. But I do hope you enjoy the videos. Anyway, that was kind of an off-topic rambling there for a few minutes here. As we can see, the American B-17 is flying around and bombing us quite consistently, but doing very little in the way of damage. We can see we just took that objective city, and oh great, now there are enemy tanks on the map here. You can see, looks like an enemy Stuart tank unit just devastated that engineer unit of ours. And while our flank is, this is why you want to have a very robust front line rather than a very narrow front line. As you can see, our flank would be in danger if there were only 1 or 2 hexes wide of a supply line. That enemy armor could cut us right off. Now, fortunately, we've advanced down a wide front, which would prevent that from happening. But again, that enemy armor unit just nearly totally wiped out that infantry unit of ours. We're going to pull back into the city. Hopefully, defending from a city provides more defense against a tank than the open ground that we just fought those enemy tanks in. Well, we're probably going to have to pull these troops back to safeguard our supply line and to deal with that enemy armor. We still don't have the command points to deploy our armor unit, which we purchased several turns ago, but are simply unable to use it at the moment because of our lack of command, whatever that represents. So, yeah, that's the situation we're in right now. As our western flank is not an objective city, but certainly a city that's in the way. We're kind of trying to cut them off, and you can see the enemy armor unit are once again attacking our infantry heavily, very successfully, unfortunately. Here as we move into turn, what are we moving into turn 23 now? But yeah, that's where we're at right now. We've captured 3 of our victory locations. We still have a very weak force left in this city here that the armor is attacking. Our artillery is doing absolutely nothing versus these tanks, and our infantry is too far away to help this turn. Meanwhile, we don't have the points to deploy our armor, and that's where we're at right now. We'll continue advancing south here with this 1 infantry unit. That is a little bit risky. If the enemy advanced from that city on the east, they could cut this infantry unit off pretty easily. But just trying to get an eye on where the enemy is. You know, we're getting very close to the last couple of cities here, and just trying to gauge where the enemy is located so we can better plan our strategy going forward. A reconnaissance in force would probably be the accurate way to describe throwing that 1 infantry unit way to the south all on its own. The one positive is if the enemy does destroy this infantry unit of ours here at the end of this turn, then at the very least it should open up some command points, I believe, so we can finally deploy that armor unit. You can see here the air units and the armor the armor is engaging our infantry yet again, and once again our infantry are getting mown down. I feel like engineers should be able to counter armor somewhat. But it doesn't appear so, as the enemy has wiped out that infantry unit of ours, and I believe that's our first unit we've lost this battle. No, second unit, because we lost the dive bombers. That's right. So we lost the dive bombers and we lost that infantry unit. Those are the only 2 casualties we've had thus far. You can see here the armor seems invulnerable, but hopefully by pulling this heavy weapons unit back, we can start to inflict some casualties on the enemy. We can also surround them and cut them off from supply so that next turn they'll be out of supply and much easier to deal with than they are right now. We'll continue pounding them with artillery. It doesn't seem to be doing much, but there you can see the color of the hex just changed, so the continual artillery fire while inflicting no casualties has disorganized the enemy. Meanwhile, there's a special event. The enemy is dug in around the city of San Ingata. We should bypass this fortified position and cut it off before assaulting it. So essentially, the enemy is digging in for a last stand at the southern edge of the map, at the last objective point, and that's where they're kind of digging in for kind of a last stand in this battle. Meanwhile, we're only about halfway in, so it shouldn't be too difficult to, at the very least, win by turn 50, although turn 35 may be a little bit optimistic given how heavily dug in those troops are there in the south. Meanwhile, we just deployed our armored unit, in addition to our infantry units finally inflicting some casualties on the enemy. Our armor units can now do the same, hopefully once we're able to do that. Trying to cut off this city here on the corner of the map. I'm not sure if the city generates supply or not. It seemed like the last city I cut off didn't actually go out of supply. So maybe city units don't go out of supply at all. I don't know. I'm kind of confused on that at the moment. But our armor unit can also... oh, wait, no. Those are our bombers, aren't they? Yeah, okay. So we're bombing those guys, and there we go. We're going to end that turn, move into the next turn, and actually, this is going to be the last turn that we focus on in this video here, and in part 1, I suppose, of our attack on Manila, or on the Philippines, with the drive toward Manila. You can see there the armor unit was cut off from supply, so they pulled out and got backed into supply. But the way supply works is even if you're out of supply, if you move into supply, you don't get that until the end turn button's clicked again. So they'll be full supply once this turn starts back up. But they'll be in open terrain, hopefully, and more easy to deal with. You can see they're also still disorganized. So our organized brand new tanks against the American M3 Stuart tanks, which are light tanks, are going to have some success here as we're wearing the enemy down. We haven't destroyed it completely, but we are driving them back, and they should be easy to be dealt with. Meanwhile, guys, we're right here at the middle point of the turns in this video, or in this scenario. I don't want to make this an hour-and-a-half long video, which it very well could be longer. It's hard to say. We're almost at 50 minutes. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the video off just about here, and we'll pick up with a second video that's going to focus on the battle for North Luzon and the drive on Manila, and finishing up hopefully our successful drive to push the Americans back into the Bataan Peninsula. But again, I appreciate you tuning in. Let me know about your thoughts in the comments and descriptions. Feel free to like, rate, subscribe, all of that jazz. And until next time, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. This is the Historical Gamer signing. Well, actually, real quick, one other thing. I may start discussing historical events in the next video. These first 2 videos have been largely impressions videos of the game, talking about some of the mechanics of the game. Next video may delve into more historical topics. But anyways, guys, that's all the time I have for you today. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, I'm out.